Abe Kawa, who is Malky's brother, who is George Masvidal's manager, okay, came out and made a statement that the champ Usman is irritated or bothered, something along these lines, that he's not getting the media opportunities that his challenger, George Masvidal, is. And I offer you who said it because we didn't hear Usman say it. We don't even know if it's accurate, but let's speak on it anyway. Because it would at least be accurate in the regard that Masvidal has come in and sucked all the air out of the room for everybody. I mean, this literally went from 1 week ago, guys, being discussed as the greatest and most loaded UFC of all time. Now, you can push back on that all you want. You can bring up UFC 100 and 200 and your favorite card. That's not the point I'm trying to have. That narrative was out there. When you have 3 championship fights plus PVZ on a card, you got a real argument to it. That narrative is gone the second George Masvidal stepped into this. This has become a one-fight card. I do not say this to be a rude, condescending prick. If Jose Aldo never sets foot in Abu Dhabi, it doesn't change anything for this weekend. Just a reality. Same goes with Volkanovski and Matt. It's just the reality. This is a one-fight card now. And that is the new narrative that's out there. And by the way, that narrative's accurate. It is no longer about the whole card and the body of work. It is about George Masvidal is going to step in against the baddest dude in the world at 170 pounds, Kamaru Usman, on 6 days' notice, drop 22 pounds and fly 15 hours to do it. I mean, that is the story. And you cannot turn on a sports show without seeing Masvidal. So that part of it would at least be accurate. Now, does that actually bother Usman? Let's set that aside. Let's talk about it anyway. Let's say it does. You then come with another question of what can be done. Look, we've talked about this many times. One of the downsides to having a big star in the room, and I remember when this was going around, there was talk that Conor was going to leave and Ronda was going to leave, and it was going to be at the same time. And when these two left, what is the UFC going to do? They are going to be out of business. I mean, this was the talk, and people even within the industry, our own media, believed it to be true. They just didn't have the foresight or the vision to see how these things happen. They didn't study the history of the sport to see how these things happen. It's a very real talk. What happens when you have 2 big stars in the room, they will suck out all of the air. You can't really have a third star. You can't have a third star until they can tell their story. They can't tell their story unless they can get a hold of the media to get a hold of the people. It goes in that order. So if you remove Conor and you remove Ronda, you didn't just remove your 2 biggest stars. You just open an opportunity for somebody else to take their spot. That's the way this works. But I offer you this example because if you do have a star, and Masvidal is, who steps in, he's going to take all of the questions. You're going to get the scraps. And what that means is all the media is going to come in and ask for a request to get Masvidal. Masvidal's calendar is going to fill up, and then there's going to be fill over. Those people and producers and outlets are going to be told, no, you can't have Masvidal, but here's who's available, and then they're going to choose from there. That's the way it works. Once all of those people are satisfied and there's nobody left, there's no more opportunities. So it's a very real thing. Now, before you turn on the system that I just laid out for you and think that's somehow unfair, that's not unfair. I'm just telling you what the system is. So you have to learn this and figure it out, and then you can make your moves to attempt to disturb that system or manipulate that system. But first you have to learn what it is. So that's what it is. Okay, great. Let's take a look at a few people who have looked at that, who have observed it, and then attempted to disrupt it and did it successfully. And in the world of social media, it's very easy to do at a pace that is very rapid in comparison to, say, where the world was just 20 years ago. 23 years ago when I started in this sport. That just wasn't an option. Get your own message out there. What are you talking about? Not even an option. 3 guys, 3 quick stories that you can learn from, though. But the first is Kevin Lee. So Kevin Lee is great. He's a good-looking guy. He's young. He's energetic. And he's very fun to listen to. Unless he was a co-main or a main event spot, the PR team at the UFC is not even looking for media opportunities for him. Those go to the 4 athletes that are in a co-main event or a main event of each card. Now, the good news is there's a card every single week. So that gets spread around a little more than it used to, but it still goes to those 2 spots, and those 2 spots exclusively. So when Kevin finds this out and finds out, well, I'm not one of those guys, I don't need to sit by my phone anymore waiting for it to ring. It's not going to ring. Nobody's even trying to get it to ring. What am I going to do? So he gets out his phone, he goes through his Rolodex, he gets his credit card out, he calls in every favor that he possibly can, and then he buys his own flights and his own hotels and starts going to different locations to get media opportunities. Guess what happened on the back end of Kevin's own investment, his own media tour that he did? Very back end. Guess what happened? His phone rings. They offer him a fight for a world championship and a main event spot against Tony Ferguson. That's what happened. So all that investment paid off 25-fold without question in 1 week. One idea that he followed through on, and 1 week later, he's now in that main event spot. Oh, and by the way, it also happens to be for a world championship. Very big deal. Kevin Lee hasn't been less than a main event since then, except for one time, but that was on a Madison Square Garden card, where he was still on the main card. That's good enough for anybody, right? Okay. So then go and look at, say, Colby Covington. Colby has completely revolutionized how you sell yourself and you do MMA, and people hate to give him that credit. Now, over a period of time, people are going to look back and thank him for this, right? When you first start doing something, people ask you, why are you doing this? After it works, they ask you, how did you do this? So Colby, who lives in Florida, now if you're in LA or you're in New York, which are the two media meccas of the world, and without question within North America, but of the world, it's pretty easy to get media opportunities. He's in Florida. What are you going to do? You have to factor that in. This is part of the challenge that he's up against. So he goes, well, here's what I'll do. I'll do a lot like Kevin Lee. I'll get out my own credit card. I'll get out my own cell phone. I'll bring in my own cameras. I'll start producing this stuff myself. I'll put it out to the world. It worked. Colby Covington also has not been less than a main event or a world championship fighter since he started doing this. Henry Cejudo gets this same pat on the back. Henry Cejudo hasn't been on the Jim Rome show or the Dan Le Batard show. He hasn't flown out to Bristol and done the car wash at Sports Center since I don't know when, if ever. Henry Cejudo gets his message out 3, 4, 5 times a week. Anytime he wants to, he gets it out. But he brings in his own cameras. He mics himself up. He brings in the light. Whatever it has to do, whatever he was waiting for somebody else to do for him, which is the typical and standard formula, he figured out those pieces. He brought it to himself. He made his own content, and he gets his message out. A number of years ago, I want to put this around 2008. But for the holidays, Dana sent everybody on the roster a very nice gift, but it was a camera. It was a camera where you could film yourself, and it was called a V-blog, a video blog. Film yourself, put one cord in, load it up to your computer, boom, and blast it out to the world. And this was right before like Instagram had caught on or Facebook was allowing videos, but there were still platforms to do it. You could do it in shorter versions and put it on Twitter. You could do it on shorter versions, send it to media outlets, let them play it for you, shorter versions, post it to the underground. Just by example, there was still stuff that you could do. I remember when I got mine, I had to go thank Dana. It was a very nice gift. I got him nothing. He got this gift. It was very nice. It wasn't cheap, but I was never going to use it. What am I going to do with this camera? So I went out and thanked him. Thank you very much. I got the gift. Happy holiday to you too. And he wrote back real simple words. He said, "You're welcome. Start V-blogging," with like 4 exclamation points. I remember staring at that and going, why would I start V-blogging? Well, why would have I missed that opportunity to V-blog? Is how you got to look at it now. I would have been one of the first guys V-blogging. So he sends this to all 556 guys under contract. I think all 556 had the same opinion as me, which is, why would I do that? How would I do it? Where would I do it? What would the benefit of that be? That seems like a lot of work. Why would I do that? Well, he was given a message. He was given a message, and he was writing the check for it, which was, the sport is changing. You are now not only going to be responsible for getting your own storage and messages out there, the world in a very short period of time is going to be a place where you have an opportunity to get your own story and your own message anytime you feel like it. You don't need your phone to ring and then get on an airplane and fly over here and check into a hotel to pop into a radio station for a 2-minute hit, put the tape in rewind, and fly back home. You can now do it yourself. It was a very proactive thought. And I'm going back to 2008 when he very first had it, but I can fast forward all the way to 2020, and I can only tell you 3 guys that have really used that concept. And I just did. Kevin Lee, Henry Cejudo, Colby Covington. I'm not sharing for you that everybody has to go out and do that. If you're a champion like Usman is, you're going to get some major opportunities. If you see somebody else that's getting more like anybody, maybe you would be jealous and go, well, I wish I would have had that. He's still going to get very good opportunities. No question about it. All main events and co-main events do. But if you want to manipulate that system and break in to that tier and get some of those opportunities, there's other ways to do it. I'm laying out a few for you with a few examples of guys who actually did it. But this whole thing, at its finest, is simply storytelling. And you'll never get around that. Any TV you see on, any program that you like or have enjoyed, any movie that you'll go to the cinema and put down some money in exchange to get to watch a couple hours of entertainment, they tell a story. I'm not bringing to you a new concept. I'm just trying to open your eyes that this sport is no different. The punches and the kicks are not enough. There was a time when it was. There was a spectacle. It was viewed as a spectacle. There was a cage that was set up somewhere in an arena, and two guys were going to enter it at one point. I mean, there was a time where this was a spectacle, and that started, and at one point was enough. You didn't see very many punches and kicks within a cage. You then even had a time where you started learning two new techniques. Remember when Big Nog was coming along over in Pride and he was putting somebody in like a rolling shoulder lock? We didn't even know what that was called at the time. Then he reached down and grabbed the ankle and twist your foot at the same time. It was like this thing of beauty. That also was an era of this sport where the technique started to advance. Or you could go back even further if you're at that level of a fan. Remember Oleg Tektarov? When he would be on his feet clinched up with somebody and then roll for what turned out to be called a knee bar, which is a very basic technique, but none of us had ever seen it. Only Russian Sambo athletes, it was the only sport in the world that did and practiced a knee bar. Now, a knee bar would be very simple to do, and it would be even more simple to stop. You're not going to see a finish by knee bar in a period of time, and you'd have to go back a period of time since you've seen it. But at that time, that was must-see TV. Those eras have come and gone. And now when you do have something that is on television and readily accessible through the worldwide leader at least once a week, it just takes a little bit more. That's all I'm offering for you. And I'm reminding you once again that storytelling ability is so important. And don't ever lose it and don't ever forget it. And if sometimes you don't have a story, sometimes you just got to go create content. Henry Cejudo has not even had fights before. One night he tucked his championship belts into bed and said a bedtime prayer with them. This was 2 or 3 years ago. I remember it like he just did it. It was so creative. Who would ever think to use a bedroom and your only props are your championship belts with some pillows and some covers? And he made cinema out of it. He's taken fake snakes out of bags and whipped them on the floor before. I mean, these are simple and cheap props. One time he did a cannonball into his swimming pool in his backyard in Arizona. He wasn't even telling you a who, what, when, why, or where, but there was something to see. There was something to see that was interesting. And sometimes that's the best you have. Sometimes you don't have the who, what, when, why, or where. So sometimes there's a payoff that has to come later. You start the process. You start the tease, which is also an important part of storytelling. And the next time Henry wants to do something, maybe he will have some more specifics, and maybe he will have a date and a button that you push and a way to monetize it. But what he's doing is building a base that makes sure they stop what they're doing and they click to listen to whatever his message is. That stuff is valuable and it pays off, but it takes time. Get started now. Much like Dana told me in 2008, I wasn't smart enough to see it or believe it. Start.